Portia Robertson. I am the Chief Executive Officer of a place called Focus Hope. For those of you who are not as seasoned as I am, Focus Hope is an organization that has been around for 56 years. We are celebrating our 56th year in existence. Focus Hope was founded by Father William Cunningham and Eleanor Josias. Some of you all are nodding your heads because you're very familiar with those names. And we were founded after the 1967 rebellion that happened in Detroit, Michigan, right on Oakland Boulevard in the surrounding neighborhood where we still live and breathe and work today. So I also invite you to come over and see what Focus Hope is doing. We run a workforce development and education program so that we can make sure that people get jobs that provide a living wage. We do an early learning program, so we have Head Start, Early Head Start, and we do a senior food program that feeds over 42,000 seniors per month. So we know that the need is still there, and as long as the need is there, we are going to be there.
Amen.
Let me give you a little bit of background about Focus Hope, and then I want to shift into why we're here today, a little bit more background. We are, in fact, an advocacy organization, and I think one of the reasons these kind of events are so important to me is because we should be advocating for the people that we serve and also for the people that work at Focus Hope. And so when people question why I'm at events like this and I speak and I MC and I'm honored to be asked, it's because this work has to continue. We have to make sure, and I've said this over and over again, I want Focus Hope, selfishly, I want it to go out of business. And we can go out of business where people know they can get the right education so they can get good living wage jobs. It would go out of business when no senior is food insecure every month. Right. It would go out of business when every child has that Head Start and that early Head Start, and so that they can be competitive in this global economy when they reach kindergarten. Now, everybody laughs at me when I talk about kindergarten because they say, oh, Portia, it's kindergarten. Kids don't have to be competitive. Look at this world we're living in right now. Our kids have to be as competitive as every other child in every other school district around this state and around this country to make sure that they are as successful as we know that they can be. So we are that advocacy organization that wants to continue to make sure that everyone is given the services they need to very much lean into what they can become. I also want to talk a little bit about when I got to Focus Hope. You know, we had a little bit of a crisis. I've been there a little over 6 years now, and when I got there, we had about $6 million in debt, which is never an easy thing, right? But one of our first goals at Focus Hope, mine and my team at Focus Hope, was to make sure we got out of that debt without getting rid of any of our colleagues, without laying off any colleagues, which we were able to do during a pandemic. But more importantly, and what was most important to me, is that we raised the wage at Focus Hope to at least $15 an hour. Now, I will be the first to admit that that is not enough, right? But I will also say that what I will not do is have the folks that work at Focus Hope serve us, serve the residents that come through our doors, be a part of our mission, and yet have to do more and more to just get by. So the more that I can make sure that they are making a living wage, and we've had an increase of what we call our merit/cost of living increase every year since then, is to make sure that we are doing the very best for our colleagues at Focus Hope. So this work is personal for me. It makes sense to me because I know that people need to be able to be proud of the work that they do, but they also need to be given a wage that allows them to live comfortably. And so for that reason, I am so excited to see you all here today. I'm so excited to, again, celebrate what Michigan has done. I'm so excited about our panelists and our speakers that are here today. And I just want to say thank you for the work that all of you all have put into this. This doesn't happen because of any one leader at any one organization. It happens because a number of organizations, including One Fair Wage, including the People's Action and Fins for Democracy, get together and say, we are going to co-sponsor this. It happens because congresspeople like Congressman Jackson make it work on the federal level. Our state lieutenant governor, our Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist makes it happen at the state level. Our state reps like Scott have been involved in this work since the beginning of time. So she's been involved in this work, and we make sure that people understand what is happening. Minnesota sort of led some of the charge, and we know A.G. Allison. He's our homeboy from Detroit, so we know he's going to get it done, right? Because if you come from Detroit, no matter where you go, there's a different kind of flavor here, right? So we know he's going to push for this to happen. We know he's going to be a key colleague in this work. And so I want to thank all of them, but I also, again, want to thank every one of you all, because this work does not happen without your tireless advocacy and your pushing people to understand why this is necessary. I had to learn a little bit about why and where this came from, right? And it blew my mind. Like, we're still talking about people getting wages that were given, or living off of tips that were given to particularly people of color and women, of course, because they didn't want to pay us a wage after emancipation. What is that? Like, this country is still doing that to people, right? And so we've got to elevate that story, because I think there are very few of us who know where tips came from, right? The tips were a way of still not paying us after emancipation. That's just ridiculous. You see how high my voice gets? Because I know how ridiculous it is. It just made me mad to think, especially as a Black woman. I'm like, we already don't get paid enough. We already don't get paid as much as other folks get paid. So to think that we are still living with the ideas and the processes by which Black women and people of color were not paid after emancipation is unacceptable. And we have to continue this fight. All right, so we have a full agenda today, so I'm going to stop talking, but you can see I like to talk, so I can keep going, especially on this issue. I want to introduce Saru Jaya. Well, let me say it right. Jayram. Let me get it right. Because with a name like Portia, you can imagine what it's been pronounced like. So I try to really be clear about getting names right. She's the co-founder and president of One Fair Wage and the director of the Food Labor Research Center. Together with so many of you all in this room, she has been leading the fight to raise the minimum wage and end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers nationwide, and here in Michigan for the last decade. You guys put your hands together and welcome Saru to the show.
And like she said, there's a gazillion people to thank, and I'm going to try to get to everybody because so many people were involved with this victory, and I'm going to try my best to name as many of them as possible. But it's important for us to first remember why we're here and what has happened, because it is so historic. And before I get into things that are very important and serious, I do want to just mention coffee has arrived in the back of the room. So we need to wake up a little bit. I know Coffee Farmer Jackson drove in 6 hours yesterday from Chicago. So let's get Coffee Farmer Jackson a coffee, please. Would you guys like coffees? Okay. Any new? Coffee? Okay. All right. Well, this work really began with the man who's getting the coffee. His name is Tekhan Mamdouh, and he worked at a restaurant called Windows on the World, which was the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center, Tower 1. On that morning, 73 workers died, 73 of Mamdouh's colleagues, and 250 workers lost their jobs in the restaurant where Mamdouh worked. Windows on the World, 13,000 restaurant workers lost their jobs in the months and weeks following the tragedy. And Mamdouh and I, after the tragedy, came together and started an organization called ROC, the Restaurant Opportunities Center, in 2002, and started surveying restaurant workers all over the country, including in Michigan, to ask people, what are your top needs and concerns? And everywhere we went, workers would say, it's my wages, it's my wages, it's my wages. And when you looked at the data, the government data, you understood why they kept saying that. The restaurant industry is by far the largest and fastest growing private sector employer in the United States, 14 million workers. 1 in 10 American workers works in restaurants, 1 in 7 American women, 1 in 2 young people has worked in the industry. It is an enormous industry, and it is the absolute lowest paying industry in America due to a very ugly history that Portia referenced. So prior to emancipation, waiters in the United States, mostly in the Northeast, where we had restaurants at the time, were white men. They got actual wages. They didn't get tips. Tipping was not prevalent. Tipping, in fact, was very reviled as a legacy of feudalism, in European feudalism. We said, we're a democracy. We don't do that. But in 1853, those white men went on strike. The first maybe coordinated strike of service workers in 1853. Waiters went on strike. And the restaurant industry immediately started looking for cheaper labor. And at first they found it with white women. But after emancipation, 2 industries in particular said, oh no, we have a better idea. One was the Pullman car porters, the Pullman industry. Luxury trains running across the country. Congressmember Jackson is very familiar with this. There's a very revered history for all our folks who've come in from Chicago. I want to recognize them. The Pullman company was based in Chicago. And the workers were initially told, just like restaurant workers, you don't get a wage, right? They hired tens of thousands of black men and said, you don't get a wage, you get only tips. And then the restaurant industry started hiring black women and told them the same thing. Don't get a wage, you get only tips. Well, the black men started organizing in the Pullman trains under the leadership of A. Philip Randolph, as you all know, won the right to one fair wage, a full minimum wage with tips on top in 1937, and it was in response to their organizing that an entity called the National Restaurant Association was formed, the other NRA. They've been around for 100 years, since 1919, and they were formed with the express mission, intent, and purpose of ensuring that the women in the restaurant industry never got what the men in the Pullman train got, which is a full minimum wage with tips on top. So since 1919 until today, they have continued to argue that they shouldn't have to pay their workers because we, the customers, pay their workers' wages for them. And they've been very successful at it. They've won that in 43 states and Congress, where, of course, the federal minimum wage for tipped workers is still $2.13 an hour. And until July 31st of this year, Michigan was one of 43 states that persisted with this legacy of slavery. And we have been fighting that for 2 decades. The Restaurant Association has been a formidable enemy, putting my children's pictures up on attack websites, following us around the country, sending us death threats, sending people to my house to bang on our windows in the middle of the night. It's been a very difficult fight. And yet, despite all of that, we are winning. We are winning because, with the pandemic, everything has changed. 1.2 million workers walked off the job from restaurants saying, enough is enough, we can't put up with this anymore, the tips have gone down, the harassment has gone up. We were already the industry with the highest rates of sexual harassment because it's mostly women having to put up with so much to get those tips. Harassment went way up, workers were said, we're done. They started walking off the job, and thousands of restaurants, great restaurants like Godwin from Young Village here in Detroit, very grateful to him for being here today. Started saying enough is enough. We're going to have to raise wages in order to recruit and retain staff. And so they did. We saw 1,000% wage increases. We saw restaurants going from $2 to $20 because they had to. And it was clear that they could. They could do it. And they did. And as a result of that transformation, we said, this is our moment. We have to go really big. And we launched something called 25 by 250, moving bills and ballot measures in 25 states by the United States 250th anniversary, and we kicked it off with a big win in Washington, D.C. November 22, we won a 400% wage increase for tipped workers. November 22. Chicago, under the leadership of Nataki. Where is Nataki? She just walked in the room. There she is. Congrats to all the Chicago workers that are here that ended this legacy of slavery in Chicago. Thank you to Congressmember Jackson and all the folks in Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson and others who supported us with that win. And now Michigan. And we want to tell the Michigan story really importantly and recognize all the people who are involved. But before I do that, I want to say part of the momentum that we're seeing, Michigan has created this momentum that is now likely to follow in Illinois, likely to follow in Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, so many states. Michigan has become the first state east of the Mississippi to end this sub-minimum wage. And now it's gone federal because 3 weeks ago, the Harris Waltz campaign publicly endorsed ending the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. And following that, Congressmember Stephen Horsford, chair of the Black Caucus, co-chair of the Harris Waltz campaign, named ending the sub-minimum wage, actually introduced legislation, many of us were there with him, introduced legislation in Congress to end the sub-minimum wage, something that our dear friend, Congressmember Keith Ellison, has been fighting for since the beginning of our fight 10 years ago. This is going to be the law across the country. The Restaurant Association is going to have to deal with it, and it's thanks to Michigan, which is leading the way. How did this happen? Well, back in 2014, my friend Dave Woodward, standing right there, former state legislator, and I, together with a woman named Minsu Langiaru, started Rock, Michigan, and initiated the first minimum wage fight in the last decade or so, in 2014, collected enough signatures to put minimum wage with tip workers on the ballot, and the legislature, which was led by Republicans at that time, undermined our effort, changed the law so that the initiative could not go on the ballot. I do want to name some of the people who were involved with that. Frank Houston, who helped collect the signatures, Mark Brewer, our lawyer, and Dave and Minsu. We came back in 2018, we said we're going to keep at it. I want to name Dr. Alicia Renee Ferris, lead Rock at that time, collecting the signatures. All of Rock, Michigan that was around working with us to collect the signatures to put it on the ballot. EGEM, Economic Justice Alliance of Michigan, partnering with Danielle Atkinson with Mothering Justice to put also paid sick leave on the ballot at the same time. Helena Scott, who was collecting signatures, now a state representative at the time of Jobs and Justice, collecting signatures in the winter months. We got funding from UAW, MEA, SCAU. Want to thank all of them for their support. And everybody knows what happened in 2018. We tried to collect the signatures. We did, in fact. We were going to be on the ballot. The legislature said, this is going to turn out the wrong people to vote, took it off the ballot, made it the law, and said, we're going to amend this after, we're going to reverse it after the election. So we sued, and I want to name and congratulate the plaintiff of that lawsuit, who is here today, James Hoff, restaurant We filed that lawsuit, but we said, you know what, that lawsuit's taking too long, and we came back in 2022, and I want to name people who then were part of the effort. This has happened, y'all. We did this 3 times, 2014, 2018, 2022, Julie Campbell Bode, Chantel Watkins, and Tracy Pease, all involved in collecting signatures in 2022, and so many other people who were involved in 2022 to get 15 on the ballot. All of that culminated this year with a victory. I want to name the One Fair Wage staff and leaders who are in the room. Justin, who was with us previously and now is in the city of Detroit. The canvassers who are currently registering voters, here in Michigan on this issue. And of course, our worker and employer and elected partners, James and Godwin. The Lieutenant Governor, how could we ever have done this without a Lieutenant Governor who has all the state electeds, Donovan McKinney, Stephanie Chang, all obviously Helena Scott who've been leading this. Our dear friend, Attorney General Keith Ellison, who has shown the way in Minnesota. And I'm talking to him, I tried to name everybody. I'm sorry if I missed anybody. So many people have been a part of this. So many people have contributed to this. But here's the bottom line. I hope you have seen the fact that the cost of living and jobs and living wages are the top issue of every poll this year. Every poll of Black voters, every poll of Latinx voters, every poll of young people, even suburban white people, it's the cost of living and jobs and living wages. And if we can take our political hats off for a minute and just be humans, that means people are saying, this is my top issue, not just for an election, but for my life. I cannot afford to live. There's an affordability crisis right now, everywhere across the country. And so here's the bottom line. If we care about democracy, what raising wages, why that's important, not just for an election, but for a new Harris-Walz administration. Why is that important to prioritize? Because we cannot have a robust democracy when you have people earning 3 and 2 and 5 and 6 and 7. They have to work 3 jobs, 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They cannot engage civically, let alone vote. So if we're so desperate for people to vote, we're always like, why aren't these people turning out to vote? Let me tell you what would help them. To have 1 job instead of 3. To have the ability to actually go out. That is what's going to make a robust democracy. And that's why this today is not just about the history we're making, but the history we're going to make to win this across the country. Thank you.
You know, Saruk is fired up. But I don't mind, because it's my pleasure to introduce James Hoff, come up and give us a little bit of what he has learned and knows about being both a restaurant worker and a restaurateur. So please come on.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is James Hoff. I am the named plaintiff on the Supreme Court case. I've been in the service industry since I was 16 years old. I enjoy providing professional service and being a listening ear to people as they share their lives with me, sitting at the bar. I get to be a part of creating good memories. I also, I'm a little nervous. I have also had a helping spirit, and being in the industry has helped me fulfill that. This set minimum wage is a really big problem. We should not have a situation that people are being paid as low as $2.13 or $3.45 like I was. This is why we took the case to the Supreme Court and ultimately won. It is time that we do away with this legacy of slavery. It is our hope that other states follow our lead here in Michigan. It is possible to raise wages and sustain a restaurant industry. This issue is top of mind for everyone I know. The key to economic growth in our country is to raise wages. Right. And whoever wants to win in November should make this a top priority issue. I want to thank all of those who contributed to raising the minimum wage here in Michigan, especially our Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. Thank you guys. I want to invite Lieutenant Governor to come up and say a few words. All right, how you doing?
I do want to thank you, James, for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge the other plaintiffs that included not only the Restaurant Opportunities Coalition of Michigan, Mother and Justice, others who stepped up and fought for people, because that's what this is about. It's about creating space and opportunity and a path to health and wealth for all people. That's why we're here. And I want to put this into a bit of context. As Saru mentioned, like, stuff is expensive in life right now. That's an understatement. And so it's all of our responsibilities as leaders to make sure we find the opportunities to put money in people's pockets while working to make things less expensive. And certainly in the state of Michigan, under the leadership of my partner, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and myself, with the allyship of the first Democratic trifecta in more than 40 years, Representative Scott and others here, we have worked to make sure that more people could have more resources to deal with this challenging economic time. And so while we are here to celebrate the fact that action has been taken to raise wages for almost 2 million people in the state of Michigan. But we also know that there's more work and opportunities can be done, which is why we have done things like quintuple, that means a 5x increase on the working family tax credit in Michigan. Now, the working family tax credit exists for people who are working but still need help to make ends meet. But by 5x in that, that's putting on average $3,500 into the bank accounts of 750,000 households in the state of Michigan. Half of the children in the state of Michigan can be elevated closer to coming out of working poverty with that kind of program.
Amen.
This is about changing what is true for people in terms of their economic stability and therefore their economic potential. There are a lot of people who have retired from one career but may be working a currently minimum wage job today. One of the reasons they have been doing that is because in Michigan for the past 13 years up until this year, something else the Republicans did to mess with people's money was that they started taxing people on fixed incomes retirement so they could cut taxes for rich people in big companies. Well, Democrats in Michigan decided that that should no longer be the case. And last year, this Democratic majority, one of the first actions that they took was to repeal that tax on retirement income, putting thousands of dollars back into the hands of retired people. And all of this stuff exists in a context. And so I am proud and appreciative for the values represented in this fight and the energy that is brought to it every single day. And I want you to continue to keep that same kind of energy in finding ways to fight for working people, because that is what I will continue to do. That is what Governor Gretchen Whitmer will continue to do. That is what Democrats in Michigan will continue to do. And that's what we must press for Democrats to do all up and down the ballot of every elected office, so we can have a Democratic majority in Congress with Congressman Jackson, who will probably join us here. We have vacancy here in Michigan for people to fight for working people. We have a presidency and a vice presidency to win for people to fight for working people. We have an opportunity to have more voices on the state Supreme Court, serving alongside Justice Richard Bernstein. And this is what we can do when we make the choice to stand tall together, to work together and recognize that the right kind of economic future is the economic future where everybody has the confidence to know that they can thrive, and not feel like they've been designed out of opportunity and possibility. So thank you all for the work that you have done to help create the conditions for progress to be possible, because ultimately that is what we fight for. And I think about that, whether when I was in Godwin's restaurant, Young Billy, which y'all gotta come and see that, y'all off rice with him, by the way. But I worked as a server for an hour and was scared to death I was gonna drop something. Julie remembered I almost dropped one of her plates. But to understand what it means to be fighting alongside people is what this service is all about. We're gonna do it in Michigan. Thank all of you, thank all of our allies, thank our champions, most importantly, thank the working people of the state of Michigan for being so steadfast. Not only being part of Michigan's past, not only defining Michigan's present, but helping us imagine a better future for all of our people. Thank you.
So I like to call the Lieutenant Governor my tallest little brother. So I was going to give you some orders to introduce Godwin, because he's already been over there and enjoyed the jollof rice, as he already said it to us. But since I'm up here now, I'd like you to come up, please, and give us a few words. Everybody give him a round of applause.
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Godwin Ihentugi. I'm the owner, proprietor, chief villager over at Young Village Afro-Caribbean Eats, and I am a proud supporter of the One Fair Wage campaign here in Michigan. During the pandemic, 40% of businesses of color permanently closed, and in addition to that, there were just all sorts of problems. One, the big guys like McDonald's and all those QSRs continue to see over double-digit growth within the industry, where businesses like myself, small businesses, were closing and fighting such a bloodbath with increased inflation and things like that. So we had to get creative, raising wages and things like that. I think you guys remember every single person was receiving somewhere around 16, and we quoted about 16 or 17.50 an hour from the government for the payouts. And for us, we were paying $15.50 plus an hour, in addition to already doing tips and also providing earned sick leave, so earned sick time off. So if you were a restaurant worker working with us, you still have the ability, if you needed to go take care of something and you got sick, you can still take time off, which is important for us. So we need to make sure that workers are in a situation where they can sustain themselves. You know, when I first became a restaurant worker, when I first became a chef, having been on Food Network and being a celebrity chef in my lifetime, I was very fortunate. It just pains me to think that I would be coming back and trying to start a business in an industry where my fellow coworkers wouldn't be able to sustain themselves, where my fellow coworkers would be in a situation where they would have to compromise their belief system just to increase their wage so they can take care of their family, right? These are things that pain me. So for us to make the steps to go in the right direction of having a fair wage that is sustainable both for the employer and the people who support it. And I just want to address one additional misconception, is that we're not saying that the tip will be eliminated. A lot of my people who work for me receive that $15.50 plus tip. So Sometimes they're getting an extra $8 to $10 an hour on top of their already $15.50 an hour wage. It's very important. Workers need a guaranteed fair wage, stability to return to work in restaurants. Restaurants have already met this benchmark, deserve a level playing field, so guys like me aren't competing with bigger restaurants, and it also levels the playing field because now all of those restaurants that weren't paying anything will have to change their business model. That being said, I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist and everyone who worked so hard. Tips on top. Let's get our industry back to work, guys.
So we're pivoting a little bit as we move through things. So if I change the program a little bit, please bear with me. But in the meantime, I will tell you that there are 5 Ellison men, right? And I grew up with 2 of the younger Ellison men. He's only a little bit more seasoned than I am. And up until a couple years ago, Tony Ellison was my favorite Ellison brother, right? But he just wormed his way into my heart. So I've broken the news to Tony, and now he's just my favorite Ellison brother. Ryan, Leonard, and Eric, I don't know. I gotta find a place for them too. But without further ado, he's a Detroit boy. I mean, he's a Detroit man. He's a Detroit boy forever in our hearts. H.E. Keith Ellison.
My name's Colton, my brother Tony said I'm the favorite now. Dear friends, what a great pleasure to be with you right now. I was born and raised in this city. I love this city. And to see your level of commitment and activism and the great achievement that you have brought forward by making sure that the Supreme Court of Michigan, first of all, challenging the unconstitutionality, bringing forth, stand up in court, demanding your truth, and then succeeding to make sure that you got one fair wage and a wage that is not quite where it needs to be, but is on its way there. That's a great achievement, and I hope that you are proud of yourself. Let's stand up. I can't think of anything more important in this moment, because Detroit may be the most important city in the most important state. That's a fact. In the most important election that any of us have ever lived through. Why not make a central focus of the campaign, economic affordability, livability, and what about just flat out prosperity? Something that we have a right to aspire to and to have. Prosperity. What about prosperity? What about full refrigerators, rent and mortgages that we can afford, retirement that we're building towards, schools that are making sure our kids got a real future? What about that? It is within our grasp, and yet in America, people who have engineered the economy have made it out of reach for vast numbers of people. In fact, the overwhelming majority. We've been talking about slavery, which is always a relevant topic. Always a relevant topic. And we can talk about why later, but we don't have to go all the way back to 1865. We can go to the 1970s. Did you know that productivity is how much goods and services you make in a certain amount of time? How much goods and services you make in a certain amount of time. Productivity and wages up until around 1970 would go together. Then they busted apart. And so productivity would go up, you are making more stuff in a short amount of time, but you're not getting none of the benefits of that extra money. Where's the extra money going? The people the members of the restaurant association, the NRA, the other NRA, what do they do with the money? Well, first they bought boats and houses and yachts and helicopters and private jets. And then they started buying senators and representatives. Then they started purchasing our democracy. So you ask yourself, why do the overwhelming number of people want stuff that we don't seem to ever be able to get out of politics? Gun violence, we all are concerned about it, right? 90% of Americans say you ought to have a background check. If you need a license to own a car, you should have a license to own a car. Makes sense to most people. But you don't get it because those people extracting that wealth are putting it into politics, and don't make any mistake about it. The National Restaurant Association is one of the biggest pocketers of your excess wealth around. And so you want to know where the money goes? They got it. And so what are we going to do about it? Fight for it. That street, right? Are we pointing toward what was that? What was that way? What was that? In 1963, 1962, some of y'all might even have been there. The great Martin Luther King and Walter Reuther and C.L. Franklin walked down that street and demanded not just civil rights, but also economic justice. And Martin Luther King he talked about his dream there before he ever did it in Washington, D.C. Did you know that? That is how special you are. That is how important Detroit is. The cross-section of the African American civil rights struggle and the economic struggle for economic opportunity for everyone. That's Detroit. That's why you're such a critical place. And that's why we're always fighting in Detroit. That's why the politics are contested in Detroit. And that's why every 4 years people tell you this is the most important election. Why? Because it is. Because the contradictions are getting tighter and the stakes are getting higher every single 4 years. Because people like Elon Musk know that democracy can make him pay you fair, stop his monopolies, make sure he doesn't get massive government subsidies, which he does get. Democracy can tell a billionaire no, but not if he buys democracy. You follow what I'm saying? So the politics are always fighting. How do you control a society where you got one person, one vote? If you are the overwhelming minority, because rich people, billionaires always are the overwhelming minority. How do you control a society? You got to divide. You got to use racial division. You got to tell the white ones it's them black ones. You got to tell the black ones it's them white ones. You got to tell the people born here it's the new ones. You got to tell the men it's the women. You got to tell the women it's the men. You got to tell the straight people it's the gay people. You got to tell the Christians it's the Muslims. You got to tell the Muslims it's the Jews. This is what they do. You ask yourself, why do you hear all this hate? All this hate. It's not just mindless hate. It's rational hate. It's division, which they need to control you and me. And smart people all the time have said, you know what? Solidarity is better than division. Because solidarity allows us to come together to win. Solidarity allows us to come together to win. So let me just say, congratulations. You have done a mighty thing. You've elected the right Supreme Court justices. And by the way, you don't need a Supreme Court justice who's on your side. You just need one who's fair. You don't need one on your side. You just need one who's going to call it right. And so you have succeeded here. But let me tell you, friends, in order for us to have a fair economy where we can aspire to prosperity, we've got to take this win, celebrate it, put it in our pocket, and go get the next one. We've got to organize all over the United States. We've got to have, some states already got one fair wage. Minnesota already got one. So what don't you got? Let's go get that. Have you noticed, and I'm about to sit down, that you've seen a resurgence in the union movement? You've seen a resurgence in the union movement. And so much so is the worker movement so powerful that they had to go get a union member teacher to go be vice president candidate. It helps them. It is good to have union people on your team. And it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake that the vice president is the first vice president to ever walk a picket line for striking workers. So those things alone are not going to get us a fair economy. But once we get people in office who are on our side, then that's just the beginning of a whole nother push, y'all. What's after the mountain? More mountains. Next mountain. So I hope y'all even know where he's tired. There was a lady who told Jonathan's father, maybe mom too, my feet is tired, but my soul is resting. And that's when they were fighting for civil rights in the 60s, Jesse Jackson. And I hope your feet might be tired, but your soul is resting, because in order to keep on winning this thing, in order to make this economy right and just and fair, we're gonna have to take your good example and inspire others all over the country.
That's right.
And that's what it's about. It is special to be a Detroiter. It is special to be who you are. And it is important that you do not hide your good example, but you share it with the rest of the world so that we may be inspired by what you have done. Now, friends, I actually got to go jump on an airplane, so I won't be there with you at the chain breaking. But
Right now.
Oh.
After computer. So you all know why he's my favorite now, right? In the word. So I want to thank, what I'd like to say is Governor Ellison, because I'm predicting the future. But at this point, I want to thank A.G. Ellison, and I want to ask all of you all, we are going to pivot a minute so we can catch him before he has to go. Can I have all of you all stand in your seats? Just stand up. We're going to do a ceremony, and then we're going to hear from the rest of our incredible speakers. So don't go anywhere. They all got to work between us, so don't want to lose you. Of course, we've got Congressman Jackson, we've got Supreme Court Justice Richard Bernstein, we've got Representative Scott, so they're going to be here. We're going to keep going, but we wanted to catch our Detroit son, that's the better word, Detroit son, Keith Ellison, before he had to go.
oh yeah.
As I mentioned, this came out of not wanting to pay living wages to people after the emancipation of slavery. So this is symbolic in what we're ending right now by increasing to one fair wage for everybody across this country. I think on the count of three, I'll do it. 3, 2, 1.
Love you guys.
Okay, we gotta let him go, because we gotta get him a plane, we don't wanna make him miss the plane. The next time we're driving to Minnesota, and I'm going to do that. All right, have a seat, everyone. We're gonna keep right on going, because we have some incredible speakers in our program today. We haven't done it since probably some people went over there to grab one, please do so. But come back to your seats, because I would be remiss if I did not introduce you to our Supreme Court Justice Richard Bernstein, who is so kind to come up and join us. Thank you. Knowing he is about his work, as Keith Ellison said, it's not about having the justices on your side, it's about having someone who's fair. And Justice Bernstein is absolutely that. He is a fair justice. So, Justice, I'd like to invite you up to the podium.
It's difficult for people in power to understand what real life is for so many people. It's difficult for people in power to understand what it feels like to go to the grocery store and simply not be able to afford things to feed your family. It's difficult for people in power to understand what it's like to feel that sense of hunger. What it's like to go to bed with your stomach hurting. What it's like to sleep in a place that doesn't have necessary heat.
Come on.
To be in a place that doesn't have air conditioning. When the summer gets to be brutally hot. It's difficult for people in power to understand what it's like to have to carry 2 or 3 jobs It's difficult for people in power to understand just what it's like to live a subsistence life. A life where you're not able to feel, understand, or appreciate joy. Because all you can do is focus on your ability to survive. It's difficult for people in power to understand that there's more to life than just being able to pay your bills. There's more to life than just going to work. That there's more to life than just surviving. Life really shouldn't be about survival. Life should be about much more than that. It should be about family. It should be about friends. It should be about community. It should be about those things that give joy. Those things that give pleasure. Those things that make life worthwhile. A writer once penned, the feeling that a person has when they've been offered a job, it's like they could fly. It's the notion that they're needed. It's the notion that they're wanted. But it's even bigger than that. It's the notion that you've been given a sense of respect. What a fair wage does is gives you the one thing that most people aren't able to have. It gives you your dignity. It gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a place of understanding. It gives you a sense of mission. It gives you a sense of focus. It gives you a sense of participation. Having respect, being treated with fairness, being able to have a nice place to live, having the opportunity to go to the store and purchase those items that your family needs. It's about dignity. It's about respect. It's about belonging. It's about having something of purpose and something of pride. I'm not able to speak to you about politics, and I'm not able to speak with you about cases, but I can speak with you what it's like to be human.
Amen.
What it's like to be a person. What it's like to have that struggle, to have that difficulty, to have that hardship, to have that pain. We've come a long way. By no means is it easy. By no means is it without pain. By no means is it not difficult or hard. We've come a long way because of leaders like you, because of people that care, because of people who step forward, because of people who said it's time to have a voice. It's time to matter. We've come a long way from the days where people in Tennessee had to take refuge in a garbage truck because they weren't allowed to come into the building. We've come a long way from the days where racism, discrimination was so omnipresent that it became accepted. We've come a long way. But we have many miles to travel.
Yes, we do.
We have many roads to go down. We have respect that has to be earned. We have things that we have to do. We have pride. We have joy.
Yes.
We have our respect. We have our humanity.
Amen.
We have our leadership. We have who we are. We have our place. We have our power. And it's through our power. It's through our place. It's through our respect. It's through our battles. The people will listen. The people will understand. The people will appreciate. Most importantly, people, all people, will have a chance on a human level, on a decent level, on a spiritual level, to finally be able to move forward as we go.
Justice Bernstein, there are a lot of things you can't talk about, but I will tell you, what you're talking about is what matters. And so we appreciate your words here today. As I mentioned earlier, there's someone who I said has been in this work since the beginning of time. I don't mean that around age or length of time. I mean about commitment to this issue. And I can speak personally on it because, as I mentioned, I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Focus Hope, and she is the state representative for our nonprofit. And because of that, myself and other organizations have benefited tremendously from her work in the House in terms of making sure that we are funded in a way that we can make sure that not only our colleagues get one living and one fair wage, but also that the people we serve get one fair wage. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my state rep, Helena Scott.
Really proud to be here today. As stated, I'm State Representative Helena Scott. I do have Focus Hope in my district. Was happy to get them $1 million for their to my district, Wayne County and Oakland County. But in 2018, I was an organizer, just like many of you here. And I worked with Southeast Michigan Justice. I was a lead organizer in the fight for one fair wage, working very closely with Dr. Alicia Renee Ferris, Saru, Dave Woodward. He reminded me today of the polar vortex in 2018 in the winter that we were out there. We collected 5,000 signatures from Southeast Michigan Justice. And I think that team did an amazing job. I do want to add that Dr. Ferris overall in Michigan collected over 411,000 signatures. And so I'm passionate about this work because I too as a teen was a server. One of my first jobs was as waitress at a Maple House in Northland Mall that no longer exists, making $1.90 an hour in the schools. And when I learned that tip workers and restaurant workers are making a little over $3 an hour back in 2018 and even currently today, I said, this is ridiculous. It hasn't moved the needle at all. How can people survive on this? And so I was passionate about it. As a lead organizer, stood and protested in the state capitol. We went to Washington with Saru. We did so much in the effort to make sure that workers could have a fair living wage. And as a labor and community activist through Southeast Michigan Justice, that was our mission as well. And I'm so glad, aren't we glad that we have a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate?
Yes.
I never thought in 2018 that I'd be in the State House, but through my activism, that was one of the things that catapulted me to that role. I was up there talking to legislators, wanting to know why we are still allowing this in 2018. That we really have to make a fair living wage and make sure that people can survive and take care of their families. As we know, there are a lot of moms, single moms, can't live on that wage. You just can't. And so I'm proud today to stand here in this fight with you. I've been in the fight, and I want you to know that when we fight, we win. And you guys are no front of that. That's right. And so we're going to continue to fight and on to the next battle. I'm glad that the tips will be eliminated at some point. The wages are raised, and I'm just proud that I can say that I was part of history. So thank you.
All right, we've got a few more speakers and they're all incredible. I want to make sure that we get to all of them, so bear with me for a few more minutes. This is worth us being in the room to hear these stories, to congratulate those of you all who've been working on this issue and to make sure we continue to elevate this issue so that this moves across this country, because this is the right thing to do. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our co-sponsors and ask them to come up. Julie Campbell-Bowl from Femmes for Democracy. Domenico Romero from People's Action. Come on up for a second. I'd love for you guys to say a few words.
I have very little to say that hasn't already been said. What can I say? But on behalf of Femmes for Democracy, we do have some of our volunteers in the room here. Hi, Alan. We were so happy to collect signatures back in 2022. The one thing that we know is, as AG Alison pointed out, we don't always have the power. The power is held with people that are far above us, or think they're far above us. But what we do have is the people. We have the people. And in 2022, Femmes for Democracy, we had over 1,000 volunteers carrying clipboards day in and day out from the very beginning, and I'm so grateful for each of them. But what I'm more grateful for is the team that we had around us, the people we got to work with: Saru, Mamdou, Justin, Chantel, Tracy, Sarah, the incredible team of One Fair Wage. You guys, it's so much easier to work when everyone's putting their full shoulder to the wheel. And I got the pleasure of hanging out with the Chicago guys when they won, and I thought, there's no bloody way I'm going to let Michigan go behind. So thank you so much, everybody, and thanks to the coalition. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Domenico Romero with People's Action. People's Action is a national organizing network of over 40 organizations in more than 30 states, including Michigan. And we are so excited and proud to be part of this work and this fight with you all. All the most important stuff that has been said. We share definitely the vision that what is key for the families, for the communities that we work with, is economic justice. And in economic justice, we know that our communities are pitted against each other a lot of the time in the ways that were already shared. And you all and those that have been with you and our members across the country, when they say no, when they organize together, and when they change things, we make things like this possible. That is incredible. So I feel very proud to be here representing People's Action to celebrate this win with you all. But more than that, I feel inspired and excited that this is just the beginning of what we are going to be able to do across the country. So thank you all who made this possible, who are ready to go to the next fight, and let's do it. Thank you.
So, all of our speakers today have been absolutely incredible. But we've saved the best for last. Because Congressman Jackson, as you've heard, drove 6 hours to be with us this morning. And I think it speaks to the legacy. You know, Keith, I've known for a while, Lieutenant Governor, again, one of my tall little brothers, our Representative Scott. But to know that we are going to be graced with some words from someone who is the son of the Reverend Jesse Jackson goes without saying. I know you all will be blown away as well. Again, I think, you know, I'm gonna need a selfie because my niece just started her first year at North Carolina A&T. I want to show her that, you know, these NCAT graduates do pretty good, right? But I want to say that it is an honor to have you here and to speak. And the way I would like to sit down with you and your sister and talk about what the dinner table was like in the Jackson household, I mean, it had to be amazing, the stories that you all have heard throughout your lives. After Congressman Jackson gets through speaking, we're going to hear from an incredible choir, so I'd ask for you all to stay in your seats after he finishes, and then we'll be wrapping up for the day. But please, put your hands together for Congressman Jackson.
Thank you to my sister in Chicago, sitting right here. You are making member. One Fair Wage in Chicago. I'd like to also recognize my sister, Santita Jackson. When I said I was driving over here, it's good to have a sister that's before you all take a long ride, so she looked at the weather report.
Yes.
And, storms were coming last night. I want to say a very special thank you to Portia for her advocacy and all the great work. We appreciate it. Thank you, Representative Scott, for bringing the money back home to the district. The highest and best use of all of our time. Bring it on home, as one of the blues singers has stated. I'd like to thank Saru, who is just an amazing lady that's got so much energy and vitality and has given us that chronological history that we need. I need a clip of her speech so I can continue to say that. And most importantly, to all of you with the one fair wage, those of you that have put in the work, that have made a difference to so many people, people are benefiting from your work that don't even know how this has come to being. Give yourself a loving round of applause. To my former Congressman and Attorney General Keith Ellison, and to Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, you all have a real talent and fighters in your leadership here. And it's just an honor for me to sit next to a justice. Justice Bernstein makes his way to 315 Warren Avenue because he wants to dwell amongst the people. Give my justice a loving round of applause. Justice has been invited many places, but this was very intentional for him to come here to look and see amongst the people. What's happening in Washington, D.C., I want to tell you why your vote is so important, and then ask your help on something very, very important. What's happening in Washington, D.C. is it's an ugly, hostile climate. We are on the right side of history, and thank God. Justice Bernstein talked about what do we have. But let's look at it the other way. What do they have? They have a conniving, they have a lying, they have a scandalous, they've got a person that's been sexually assaulting females, they've got one of the most lewd, licentious characters that's ever been there. They've got a vice president in J.D. Vance that says women that don't have children should not have the same right to vote as other people. They have something that you cannot look in the mirror and be proud of. When they look at their children, they have to make an excuse on why they have voted for this man. We have the right people on our side. I want to thank Vice President Walz. It was Walz who made the decision in the state of Minnesota to take it out of the county's hands for George Floyd and take it to the Attorney General's hand. That is why we saw justice for George Floyd, because of Walz. We thank Vice President Walz. We thank Vice President Harris that is breaking through new barriers and making tremendous strides. She has been faithful and diligent, and we know what Donald J. Trump is saying when he says she's not intelligent and she's not smart. When have you ever said that about a state's attorney? When have you ever said that about an attorney general? When have you ever said that about a United States senator? When have you ever said that about a vice president of the United States of America? It's vile and it's racist, and we have to make sure we get to the polls so he's never back in that office again. I had the opportunity just the other week, like many of you, when I saw the young football player Tyreek Hill handcuffed and put down on the ground. I wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the state of Florida and said, you've got to speak up on this. That same week they had the presidential debate, and there was no question ever raised about what happened to Tyreek Hill, basically in the shadows and the background of Mar-a-Lago. They said nothing. That's what the George Floyd Justice Act is all about, police accountability. You can't have all these officers standing around where someone is executed, someone is handcuffed and thrown to the ground. The same the next week, when they said the person was out to make an attempt on the president's life, Mr. Trump. That man was handcuffed, standing up, and was treated with the most gentle police conduct and care. It's time for us to get out and vote. We saw at the beginning of the Trump presidency when he says, look at my crowd size, look at Obama's crowd size, look at my crowd size, look at Obama's crowd size. Let me tell you what he was really saying in political speak. It was obvious that he was lying. Speak to me. What he really was saying is, it's more of them than us. It's more of them than us. Right after that is when massive voter suppression schemes came in to 30 states to knock us off the ballot. 1 million people have been taken off the rolls in the state of Texas. So he was saying very recorded, he was telling them, look at their crowd. He didn't run against Obama. Why was he comparing the two? Now this is coming down to what happened in Georgia, what happened in Pennsylvania, what happened in Michigan, what happened in Wisconsin. Why am I here? Because this is where the action is. This is the epicenter. That's why people are coming to Detroit. You are very much going to keep this democracy within the boundaries. What happened when he said the workers in Atlanta, he said, look at it, the workers in Atlanta. Then he went on to say, look at Philadelphia, look at Detroit, look at Milwaukee. He didn't say, look at the state of Georgia. He didn't say, look at the state of Pennsylvania, or the state of Michigan, or the state of Wisconsin. He only carved out the black voting centers and brown voting centers in those cities. It's race-based, he's whistling, he's howling. I was just at Grand Rapids the other week, I'm coming back to Detroit, and the following week, you're at ground zero and every vote counts. When Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in Kent County on the west side, come on Detroit. Come on, man. Grand Rapids matters. On the west side in Kent County, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by 541 votes. That's it. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump on the west side in Muscogee County by 22,000 votes. Joe Biden won Michigan by 154,000 votes. That was the margin of victory across the nation. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton lost in Wisconsin to Donald Trump by 0.77%, less than a percent, by 25,000, I believe 478 votes. That was the margin by which we did not come out and take full advantage, and we wouldn't have had to be involved with that tyrant. Since he's been in there, he's like a wild mongoose in a chicken coop. Just tear up every egg and everything. How can you say we don't need affirmative action? For all the strife and problems we've been through for 300 years, you tell me a program that's been in place for 50 years can undo 300 years of hurt and harm and damage? That's what he did when he put those persons on the Supreme Court. And I hear some of my friends on the other side, people are touting MAGA, 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 and this is what Trump has done. Trump has done nothing for us. Trump got teenage boys, lied on them. They were found innocent. They were innocent all along. And he won't apologize to them. He says, rough them up. Who's he talking about? You know Dylan Roof that shot up the church, Mother Emanuel, down in Charleston? Was he saying rough him up? After he got arrested, didn't they buy him some Burger King? When he says rough him up, is he talking about Kyle Rittenhouse that went out into a fight or a demonstration in Racine, Wisconsin and shot people up? Was he talking about rough him up when they took him to court? Was he talking about a George Zimmerman down in Florida? No, that's code word. That's what we have to do, and I'm so grateful for One Fair Wage and bringing us together so we can get our message on point, and it comes down to one vote. So he gave us some great history. And don't you know the 13th Amendment was passed abolishing slavery by one vote? Don't you know Congresswoman Maxine Waters had put together a housing plan for $150 billion, and there was one senator, Joe Manchin, that stopped it. We would have been done with all of our housing needs. One vote. I need you to make sure, if you will, let's understand where we are. And for those that are saying that they're going to go vote for MAGA, that we know are our friends, our colleagues, and our brothers, ask them as we put up this beautiful museum here in Detroit. Would James Baldwin vote for a person that sits at Mar-a-Lago and has dinner with white supremacists and white nationalists, or would he vote for our sister Kamala Harris? Would Reverend Martin Luther King vote for Donald Trump or our sister Kamala Harris? Would Malcolm X vote for Donald J. Trump, or would he vote for Kamala Harris? Let's put some people to sleep. Would DMX, Tupac Shakur, would they vote for Donald J. Trump or Kamala Harris? So when you see the big trajectory do you want to be on? And in closing, remember this here. Imagine a day. We got 20 days left to go. We've got roughly 20 times 24 hours. We got 480 hours left to go. Every hour counts. One thing I found out about people in office, they can count. Even if they tricky, they can count. It's crunch time. Imagine a day, and it's not long from here. On January 20th, when we win back the House and we have the President and Kamala Harris of our choice. Imagine that day when the person that's 2 heartbeats away from the President of the United States will be Leader Hakeem Jeffries. To be the Speaker of the House. Imagine that day when we get the gavels back and the Democrats are in charge, and you have a Bobby Scott that's now the head of the Department of Education and Labor. Imagine that day when Mrs. Maxine Waters gets her gavel and she becomes chair of financial services. Imagine that day when Greg Meeks gets his gavel and he becomes the chair of foreign affairs. Imagine that day when Benny Thompson of Mississippi gets his gavel back and he's the head of Homeland Security. Imagine that day when we get our power restored and we can see justice in the Capitol. Imagine that day when we don't have to wake up and see Donald Trump on television lying every day. When he started talking about the Haitians, that wasn't the whole thing. Haiti got its independence. Because they fought back. It's the first black free republic. Why are they talking about Haiti now? Why are they talking about Springfield, Ohio? Because it's a Springfield town in 30 states. So it's a metaphor. So when they start talking about Haitians are invading and taking over, he's doing fear-mongering. Those people came here escaping depression and violence at home. So then he says, that's an echo. He's beating on a drum. After Haiti received its freedom, and they fought and earned it, and they became America's oldest, longest democratic ally that we have turned our back on. He's talking about Haitians specifically because they were the first free people. He's sending a message to say, fear those. Fear them. Didn't he attack Colin Kaepernick? I want you to see the connections. These are surgical moves. He talks about the Haitians because in 1825, once they got their recognition from France, their former enslavers, they had to pay them back reparations for 122 years. So he's talking about the Negro invasion and the black takeover. So in 2025, it'll be the 200th year anniversary of Haitians having to pay back the French. And 2025 is real. When the person says, we don't need a Department of Education on the Republican side. When they say, you don't deserve to get tips, and you don't deserve to get a fair wage, and you don't deserve to get overtime pay. That's the language in the Congress today. So this isn't about Haitians, and Venezuelans, and Colombians, and Panamanians, and Peruvians, and Bolivians, and every other and. This is about Republicans lying and trying to turn back the hands of time, but they cannot stop the inevitability of God's plan, and I thank you. Let's get out to vote. One fair wage! One fair wage! One fair wage! One fair wage! When do we want it? Now! When do we want it? Now! One fair wage! One fair wage!
Well, y'all, I told you. We were waiting, but we knew it was going to be good. So now our choir's going to come up and bless us with the song, and I'll be back to say a few words before we go. Okay, choir.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven
ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let us resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has lost. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has lost. Facing the rising sun of the day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you for blessing us with your beautiful voices. I had a mom who used to tell me, just hum, Portia, don't sing. So I stood over to the side and I just hummed. I didn't try and sing along with you. You wouldn't want me to destroy your song the way you so beautifully sang it. So thank you. Thank you to everybody who came out this morning. This is a historical moment. This is a moment that we take these messages that we received this morning and continue to elevate them and make sure that people know where the tips started from. Make sure that we are making sure that people understand that everyone deserves one fair wage, right? Everybody in this room, I said Congressman Jackson was the best for last, but the reality of it is the most important people in this room are those of you who are doing this work. And I thank you for doing this work because it's not going to happen without all of us participating, elevating these conversations, and making sure that we're door knocking and getting people signed up and making them aware. You know, I get calls all the time. How should I vote? How should I vote? How should I vote? I know you all do too. So now we are part of the process of elevating and making sure that message gets out there. And I want to say a personal thank you to Saru for allowing me to be a part of this program. Again, this work is personal to me, and she is such an amazing leader. We just got a chance to get to know each other. We're already talking about what we can do going forward. And so I'm hoping that I'll be a part of the movement as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Part of a quick closing picture to pick the Congress member with the Supreme Court Justice. If you'd come up and join us for a photograph, for a quick photograph.
One more thing, I would be remiss. My brother Gary is walking around here taking pictures because he has a